Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are studying the prophet Ezekiel, the Navi Yechezkel, chapter 23, the first portion. It's a long chapter, so I'm dividing it in two halves, so this is 23a. We are approaching the end of the chapters in which the destruction of Jerusalem are being discussed. We are after the point where Ezekiel and God, as he speaks through his prophet Ezekiel, have pretty much given up on the on anything changing. The destruction is imminent. It's coming. In the last chapter, we read God expressed his anger and described the destruction. In this chapter, it's more of a lament. It's a lament using imagery, and you can feel the sadness, so to speak, of God to the extent that God can be sad. You were feeling his sadness through the words of this sadness and anger, a mix of all of the above. But again, there's no hint here in this chapter of any possibility of redemption. This is coming. The destruction is coming. In here, we also will have a lot of sexual imagery, which we had in a very graphic way back when we had the several chapters ago when we discussed the parable of the adulterous wife. Here, we're going to get the sense that God is comparing the people's corruptions to this intense desire for to be like the other nations, to be close with the other nations. Rather than being close to God, they want to be close to everyone else around them. And everyone else around them, of course, represents corruption, represents an improper way of life. And the people lusted after it, and it's describing it in the same sense, in the way a young woman would lust after a powerful, strong, handsome man. So, and that's the imagery being used in this chapter. Vayhi Dvar Adonai Elai Lemar. The word of God to me was as follows. This is verse 1, chapter 23. Ben Adam, human being. Shtayim Noshim. There were two women. Benot Eim Achat Hayu. They were both daughters of the same mother. These two women are going to represent the people of the northern kingdom, Israel, who was destroyed about 100 plus years ago from the time of Ezekiel by the Assyrians. And the second daughter is going to represent the people of Judea, the southern kingdom, whose end is just about to happen. There are two women. They were both daughters of the same mother. In other words, both the Israelites and the Judeans came from the same family background. Vatiznena v'Mitzrayim, and they started to learn their ways of prostitution, their ways of turning away from me in Egypt. So they picked up their bad customs there. Ben Urehen Zanu, they were already turning away from me when they were young children. So their roots were bad. Their roots were evil. Shama mo'achu shidehen. Their breasts were squeezed. Visham isu dade bisuleyan, and their literally this means the nipples of their virginity were handled. Just to reference the fact that even when they were young, they were already involving themselves in improper activities. So again, God is choosing sexual imagery here, but the idea is that they picked up the bad ways, the corrupt ways of the Egyptians, which wasn't just sexual, although that was part of it, but it was the going after the idol worship, living immoral and corrupt lives. Ushimotan, and what were the names of these young women? Ahala, Hagadola. The older one was Ahala. Ahala literally means her tent, or she had a tent. This is, we're going to see soon, is a reference to the temple built by the northern kingdom in Shomron in Samaria, which was a temple to idols. But that was their capital. And Ahaliva, which means, literally breaking down the word, it would translate as my tent is in her. meaning God's state. The name of the second one is my tent, meaning the temple of God, is in the southern kingdom of Judea, Achuta, and she was the younger sister. Vatienoli, I had both of these daughters, Vateladna banim uvanos, and they gave birth to many sons and daughters. And there's going to be some imagery of the people as men lusting after other women, and women lusting after other men. We're going to have both of those images. So they had banim uvanot ushmotan, and their names were Shomron Ahala. Ahala took on the name of Shomron, Samaria, the northern kingdom of Yerushalayim, and Jerusalem took on the name Ahaliva. The Ahaliva, the southern one, took the name Jerusalem after her capital. Vatizen Ahala Tachtoi. The northern one went ahead and turned away from me. Instead of turning towards me, they turned away. Vategav al ma'aveha. And she lusted after all of her lovers, all of the nations that came to her, that offered her this, that, or the other thing. She lusted after them, she desired after them, followed their ways, and not me. El Ashur Kirovim, and particularly after the Assyrians, who were Kirovim. Kirovim literally could mean closer, but also the language Kirav means those that were warriors. And as we'll see later in the context, they lusted after the powerful warrior type, the image of a woman who finds that type of thing to be attractive in men. So they lusted after the Assyrians, who were the big, strong warriors, because they were the powerful ones at the time. How were they convinced? How are they drawn away? Because they saw all of the blue royal robes, pachotus ganim, all of the officers and the generals, bachure chemed, and the good-looking young men, kulam, all of them parashim. They were riding on horses, rochvei susim. They were mounted horsemen riding on horses. This is what they saw, and they lusted after that. And they, instead of looking to me, I offered them justice, I offered them kindness, I offered them morality, I offered them a proper way of life. Instead, they wanted the strong, the powerful, the wealthy. Vatitein taznusah alehem. So therefore, she gave all of her favors to them. She spent her time worshiping them, bowing to them, flattering them. Nivchar b'nei Ashur kulam. Upon all of the chosen people of the people of Assyria, uv'chol asher agva, and in all of her desires, b'chol gilulehem, with all of their gilulim, all of the idols and corruptions that they worshipped, nitma'a, that she defiled herself with that. V'et taznusah mi Mitzrayim lo hazava. She kept going in the same way that she had learned the dishonest and corrupt ways that she had learned in Egypt. She stayed on that path. In other words, my point was, and we saw this before when God gave us a history review a few chapters ago, I wanted to purify them by giving them the ways of the Torah, but they didn't. They didn't choose that way. They didn't get purified, and they remained like this. Ki otza shachvu b'norah. That is how she laid. That is the people that she I guess hoard with, is we have to use the words that the prophet is using in her childhood. V'hema isu dade b'sula. They were the ones that handled her breasts when she was a young girl. Vayishpachu taznusam aleha, and they were the ones that poured out their lustful ways upon her when she was young. She learned those ways and lusted after things herself, and never left that path, never allowed herself to get purified and to learn the proper path. Lachein, therefore, the end result for the northern kingdom, nitatia miyad biad ma'ave. I gave her to the Assyrians. As we know, the Assyrians came, attacked, and destroyed the northern kingdom, which was the end of the northern kingdom of Israel. Biad b'nei Ashur, by the hands of the people of Assyria, asher ogva aleim. You desire them so much? Fine, I'll let them have you. Unfortunately, what happened was the Assyrians came and destroyed them. Hema gilu ervatah. They are the ones that revealed her nakedness. In this case, by destroying them, they showed that their ways were corrupt and who they really were. Banel v'nosel akachu. She took their sons and daughters, took them away. V'osa b'cherev haragu, and they killed her. They killed the entire nation by sword. Patihi shem lenashim ushvutim asuba, and they, because of the because of the justice that they did with her, she became well known among all the women, because this is just part of the metaphor of the young woman. They're saying all the women knew about her real well. They all talked about her because she was now destroyed, ashamed, embarrassed, and suffered because of her disloyalty to God. Then, now let's focus, this is verse 11, on the southern kingdom, Judea. Batera achota Oholiva, her sister Oholiva, the one in whom I had my temple, she saw the northern kingdom as well. Vatashchet agvata mimena. And instead of learning the lesson from what happened to the northern kingdom, she became even more depraved. Her desires, her lusts were even stronger, or even more, and she kept on looking. Vestas nusea, her disloyalty, miznunei achota, got even worse than the whoring of her older sister. El bnei Ashur agava, she also desired the Assyrians. She also liked Pacho, as we see the king Achaz in the time of Yeshayahu, of the prophet Isaiah, how he also tried to placate himself and ally himself with the Assyrians. We see that throughout. So they also liked the Pachotus Kanim, all of the generals and the officers, Krovim and the warriors, Levushe Michlol, who were dressed in beautiful clothing, Parashim, the horsemen, Rochve Susim, that rode on big horses, Bachurei Chemed Kulam, all of them were desirable young men. Va'ere, and then I saw Kinitma, that she herself also defiled herself. Derech Achad L'Shtei, and they're both taking the same path. Both of the women are taking the same path. Vatosef al Taznusah, and she got even worse. She made her whoring even worse. Vatera Anshe Mechuket El Hakir, and she saw on the walls sculptures of other men. And this could be a reference to the sculptures that we know, even archaeologically, we know of the sculptures that were in Assyria, in the city of Nineveh, modern day Mosul, and they saw that they had Babylonians, Chalmei, Chastim, Chakukim, Bashoshar. They heard about these even more glorious and magnificent men that were drawn in Shoshar, which is translated as vermilion, drawn in beautiful pictures and paintings. They said, "Oh, let's go there to Babylon. Let's hang out with them. They're even better than these Assyrians." And as we know from history, after the Assyrian Empire waned, the Babylonian kingdom came up, and they were the ones who ended up destroying the southern kingdom. Chagore Ezor b'mosneim, they are girded with belts around their loins, Sruchei tivulim b'rashehem, and they have flowing turbans on their heads. Mar'ei shalishim kulam, they all look like big officers, important people. Demus b'nei Bavel kastim, this was what they saw on the walls was the pictures of the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, Eretz Molatam, from the land where they came from. And her eyes saw these desirous men, and she had a lust and desire for them. So she sent messengers down to Babylon and said, "I want to be with you. I want to hang with you." And again, they turned to Babylon rather than to God. So they came, and they came to literally means to lay and have sexual relations with them. The Babylonians came, and they all laid together. And then she defiled her. Babylon also taught them her bad, corrupt ways, and defiled the younger sister as well. And she defiled Judea until Babylon became disgusted with her, until Babylon was ready to destroy her too. They came, they took advantage, and as with most illicit relationships, eventually the Babylonians came to hate the Judeans, and unfortunately that is what's occurring now, as the Babylonians are about to destroy them. And she flaunted, she revealed her whoring ways. She revealed her nakedness. And that again refers to the destruction of the Babylonians, showed how weak and how corrupt the people of Judea were, but as they and I, God says, became disgusted from her. In the same way, I was disgusted from her sister in the northern kingdom. She continued in her corrupt ways, and remembering her youth and how Asher Zon Tabir at Mitzrayim, how this all started way back down there in Egypt. And despite my many attempts at bringing them out of this way of life, they never changed. Vatagval Pilak Shehem, and she had so much desire for to their concubinage, which is relationships that are not a sexual relationship, which is not a marriage. Asher Besar Chamorim Bisaram, they acted like donkeys. Vizirmatsu Simzir Matam, and their penises acted like that the sexual organ of a horse's. In other words, they weren't faithful. They acted like animals, not human beings. They went after the wrong path. And in this way, you remembered and you brought back into memory the disgusting ways of your childhood. Just like they played with your breasts when you were in Egypt. In the same way that you had them play with your breasts when you were a child. In the same way, they're doing it now as an adult. This is the end of this section. The second half I will do in 23b. We can hear in what we're reading the sadness of God is being represented here, and how God is just completely disgusted with the way things are turning out and the way things have turned out. And the sexual imagery is just a very vivid and clear way of conveying that feeling of disgust on the part of God and on the part of his prophet Ezekiel. Thank you so much for studying this together. Looking forward to studying the rest of chapter 23 and, of course, the rest of the book of Ezekiel together.